It's Roger Stone of StoneColdTruth.com. And I'll tell you what, Roger is going to be covering the Menendez trial more than CBS, NBC, and ABC all combined just in this one segment here because, Roger, they've completely ignored it.
It's really extraordinary, Owen. You would have thought, for example, the Newark Star-Ledger, a leading daily newspaper in the state of New Jersey, would assign a lonely reporter to this beat, but there is no assigned reporter, nor is there a daily report on the trial of the senior United States Senator from New Jersey. Of course, I'm sure you saw the Associated Press the other day mistakenly reported that he is a Republican when he is most definitely a Democrat. And even though the public is not very focused on the trial, due largely because of the lack of coverage, believe me, every politician in Washington and in Trenton is focused on what will happen to this seat. Now, as a point of history, this is a matter that I have some personal involvement in because, as was disclosed by CNN, Menendez wrote a letter to the U.S. Justice Department claiming in 2014 that I was behind the various media stories regarding this scandal and his alleged involvement not only with the shady ophthalmologist named Melgum, for whom he ended up doing substantial governmental favors.
And Melgum's in Florida, right?
That is correct, although at this point, I believe he's in custody. But also, he had a convoluted defense that this entire indictment, the scandal, was cooked up by Cuban intelligence. So let's see, Roger Stone, working closely with the Cuban communists, set up Bob Menendez. Obviously, the Justice Department did not believe that this was the case.
Yeah, I'm laughing in studio here. Yeah, it's hilarious that they would assume that. It's ridiculous.
So in any event, it's important to understand from the get-go that there are essentially, while there are multiple charges against Menendez, there are two groups of charges. One of them pertains to false filings. The other one pertains to bribery. And the disposition of the seat and the timing of the vacancy of the seat very much depends on the outcome of the trial. Let us assume, for the sake of discussion, that Menendez will be convicted on the false filing issues. That's pretty open and shut. He has no defense. He has demonstrably, over a multi-year period, lied on his federal forms about income and other issues involving Dr. Melgum. Then there is the bribery issue, an entirely separate and different issue, whether he took gratuities from Melgum and others to perform governmental duties, including going to bat with the immigration system on the behalf of several girlfriends of the paid variety of Dr. Melgum's. If, theoretically, Menendez were to be convicted on the false filings but acquitted on the charge of bribery, then many believe that Chuck Schumer could stave off his resignation until after the inauguration of a new governor in the state of New Jersey. Recall that New Jersey's gubernatorial election will come up this November, one of only two in the nation with Virginia. If, on the other hand, Menendez were to be convicted of the bribery charge, it will make staving off immediate resignation more difficult. In the event that Senator Menendez resigns the seat during the calendar year of this year, then and up into the inauguration of a new governor, that allows the appointment authority to flow to Governor Chris Christie.
Roger, I think the Democrats are also freaking out about this Because obviously Menendez going down is a hit to their reputation, a hit to people like Ana Navarro that spoke highly of him. But also now they're facing another situation where they're going to lose another seat.
Well, not necessarily. Their belief is that if Menendez is only convicted on the false filing, that he can hang on to the seat, submitting a resignation letter, let's say, effective on the 1st of the year or the 15th of next year. If he is convicted on the broader charge, the public outcry against that would probably make it untenable. Now, let's assume for the sake of discussion that Governor Christie has this appointment. There are some who say that the governor could appoint himself to the seat, not with the intention of running for the full term, but with the intention of refurbishing his political credentials, fixing his estrangement from the Trump administration. In other words, Chris Christie goes to the U.S. Senate and becomes the #1 proponent, indeed the drum major for the Trump agenda in the U.S. Senate. Others believe that the governor would appoint someone else to the seat, and the early money is on Assemblyman John Bremick, a moderate Republican who's a nice enough fellow, and at least on paper would have some prospect to hold on to the seat based on his moderate to liberal social positions on a state that is most decidedly blue and left of center on those issues. Now, there were other long shot possibilities as Christie appointees. State Senator Tom Cohn, the son of legendary Governor Thomas H. Cohn, so Tom Cohn Jr., would be a strong potential, but the Cohns and the Christies seem to have fallen out based on an attempt by Governor Christie to overthrow young Tom Cohn, the state senator, from the Senate minority leadership position. Therefore, Senator Cohn's appointment appears to be unlikely. A dark horse candidate among many, both Republicans and Democrats, is former state senator Kevin O'Toole. Despite his last name, O'Toole is a Korean American, a savvy veteran of the state Senate, who also served at some time as the Essex County Republican chairman. O'Toole is very widely liked by both Republicans and Democrats. He gets along well with party conservatives as well as party moderates. And the attractiveness of appointing the first Korean American to the U.S. Senate could have some political appeal. For what it's worth, O'Toole has said that he is not a candidate for the seat and that he thinks his appointment is unlikely. Of course, that's not a Sherman-esque statement.
Roger, do you think with you bringing attention to this and other news outlets bringing attention to this that mainstream media will pick this story up at all?
Well, here's the question. Is Senator Menendez going to take the stand in his own defense? Is Dr. Malcolm going to take the stand as in this trial? Malcolm has already been convicted on a slew of charges, essentially facing a lifetime in prison. So he is a man with very little to lose. But so far, he and Menendez appear to be in a non-aggression pact. And it is unlikely at this point, according to most observers, that Malcolm will flip and go to work for the government. Remember, the early allegations about this case involved not only bribery and taking money for official acts and misfiling of various disclosure documents, but an allegation that Malcolm had entertained Menendez at his compound in Palm Beach with underage prostitutes. That will come back in just a few moments.
All right, folks, we'll be right back. More breaking news with Roger Stone. Roger Stone is with us here on the War Room. Roger Stone of StoneColdTruth.com. You can follow the War Room at War Room on Twitter and the YouTube channel War Room. Roger was just breaking down the latest in the Menendez trial and what could happen should he go down. All signs indicate that he is going to go down. Of course, the question is for what? And that's what Roger was breaking down in the last segment. Let's get back with Roger Stone. What do you foresee happening here, Roger?
Well, if in fact Senator Menendez were to be convicted of just the false filing charges and were able to avoid conviction of the bribery charges, then I think Chuck Schumer will finagle to keep him in the Senate up until the election of the new, most likely Democratic governor, Phil Murphy of New Jersey. Murphy is a strong front runner for that seat. Now, the appointment would fall to Murphy. Murphy clearly will appoint a Democrat. And the two candidates most speculated about are South Jersey Congressman Donald Norcross or former U.S. Senator Robert Torricelli. Both would be formidable going into a re-election campaign, both skilled politicians. Murphy, as governor, will face immediate financial issues. And of course, Torricelli has a long history of delivering federal pork for New Jersey and understands well the ways of the U.S. Senate. On the other hand, the circumstances of Torricelli's resignation from the U.S. Senate, where he was never convicted or even indicted in a crime, but resigned under fire in an ethical scandal that was whipped into a conflagration by the New York Times. So you have there again two scenarios. The Republican scenario, Christie either appoints himself, I think unlikely, or appoints Assemblyman Bramnick, most likely, with a couple of dark horse candidates, Senator Tom Cohn, or even the long dark horse but intriguing idea of Senator Kevin O'Toole. Or the Democrats managed to hold on to the seat into next year in a deal between Chuck Schumer and Governor Phil Murphy, in which case the Democrats will end up holding on to the Menendez seat.
Excellent breakdown from Roger Stone. Pretty much lays it all out for you there, folks, and we are still waiting to see what will happen with the Menendez trial. But if you tune in to CNN or MSNBC or CBS, NBC, ABC, they're not going to tell you anything. They're going to completely ignore that. Roger, if there's nothing else that we need to get to there, I was curious if you had any thoughts on what's going on with the Fed chair and Gary Cohn and President Trump's relationship.
I think at this point, Mr. Cohn has torched himself. I must tell you that Cohn's appointment was unlikely from the beginning. He is a liberal Democrat. He is the former top man at Goldman Sachs. As you are aware, President Trump excoriated Goldman Sachs in the campaign on two fronts. He criticized the $1 million plus secret loan that they made to Senator Ted Cruz, who poses as a populist, but is in fact a Wall Street darling, whose wife is a charter member of the Council on Foreign Relations. And although he has posed as a nationalist, his Wall Street connections and the big loans from both Goldman Sachs and Citibank would indicate that Cruz is actually a Wall Street stooge. And then, of course, Trump also criticized Goldman Sachs for the $675,000, I believe, paid speech that they arranged for Hillary Clinton, a speech, the contents of which she sought to conceal for some substantial time. That would therefore make the appointment of Gary Cohn highly unlikely, but Gary Cohn's patron in this matter, his rabbi, as it were, of course, is Jared Kushner. This is an odd appointment. Now, it is generally unheard of for a member of the White House staff to publicly criticize the President of the United States for whom he works. In fact, it is virtually unheard of for a member of the President's cabinet to criticize the President whose pleasure they serve at. Long before you were born, probably, Owen, Interior Secretary Walter Hickel in the Nixon administration criticized Nixon's comments regarding the Vietnam War, and within hours, he was, in my view, quite properly, fired. As a matter of professionalism and protocol, if you have issues inside the White House, you air them inside the White House. Clearly, Cohn is thinking about life after the White House because he separated himself from his boss, publicly criticizing the president's comments regarding Charlottesville and leaking the world that he had considered resigning. Well, he should have resigned. That would have been the honorable thing to do. This maneuver has, I can tell you firsthand, aggravated the President of the United States, and I think, therefore, Cohn's appointment to chair the Fed is now unlikely.
Yeah, everyone was kind of thinking that it was going to be Cohn and I forget the name of the current one, that those were going to be the two. Yellen, those were going to be the two. And then the list gets released of the 6 people being considered, and Cohn is not on it. But going one step further, I mean, we're kind of in an age right now where it's like Survivor White House. Is Cohn going to stick around much longer?
Well, let's hope not. And here's why I say that. There are 2 elements that I think are absolute cornerstones to Trump's success as president and his ability to be a transformational president. Or I should say a transformative president. One of them is the 15% tax rate on all businesses, big and small. This would make our tax rate lower than Mexico, lower than Canada, lower than China, lower than Japan, and American companies and European companies who are currently doing business abroad would return to the United States because it would instantly be safer, more profitable, more efficient, and of course our benefit would be an extraordinary job boom. The second piece of the economic puzzle, of course, is the restoration of Glass-Steagall, something that Cohn has given, to at least his credit, some lip service. Trump needs a driving economic advisor who is pro-growth, who is for the dynamics of his program, and will help the president sell this. I would have preferred the appointment of the Heritage Foundation scholar, Stephen Moore, or even the CNBC commentator, Larry Kudlow, both of whom were integral in putting together candidate Trump's economic proposal that includes the 15% rate. It is essential, Owen, that the president not compromise on the 15%. No, it can't go to 18. No, it can't be over time. It has to be the kind of cut that will lift the economy in a dramatic and quick fashion before the 2018 elections, preferably. And that is why we should hope that that Mr. Cohn is headed for the bleachers.
That's right. A rising tide raises all ships, and that's why this story to me is key. Hunger in U.S. drops to lowest in decade. Declining jobless rate helps families obtain nutrition. That's how Trump wants to get people on his side. More breaking news from Roger Stone. Well, folks, they just can't stop Roger Stone, can they? They just can't stop him. They can't poison him. And not even a hurricane can stop this man, as he's coming to us live after having to flee himself, his family, his pets, everyone from Hurricane Irma. And he's safe and now joining us, breaking the latest news on Menendez, Cohn, everything coming out of the White House. But I want to take this segment in a different direction. Roger, you are trying to unite Democrats and Republicans behind a common goal to legalize medical marijuana. How is that going for you?
Well, first of all, let me say, Owen, that I want to thank the many, many info warriors and followers of the Stone Cold Truth and StoneZone.com who have inquired about my family and our evacuation of Florida. I can tell you that all members of the Stone family, my children, my grandchildren, my dogs, my cats, have safely evacuated our property in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where we are potentially in the path of what may be the most powerful hurricane in U.S. history. The only member of the Stone clan that remains behind is my son, Scott Stone, and that is because he is a Broward County deputy sheriff, and he has official duties under Sheriff Scott Israel, who has an enormous task in trying to protect the public in this incredible catastrophe. The area where we reside has had a mandatory evacuation, and they have predicted most recently, because we are on a canal, the potential of a 20-foot surge. meaning virtually everything that I own that I have not taken with me will be underwater. So we look nervously in the days ahead, but I thank so many for your prayers and your best wishes in this very difficult time. The question of medicinal marijuana, which has been legalized in 29 states, has just become far more acute. That's because the House Rules Committee, at least the leadership of that committee, has blocked the implementation and attachment of an amendment that would prevent the Department of Justice from interfering with state medicinal marijuana laws. Now, it's important to note that this amendment has been attached to every appropriation bill since 2014. There is very clearly, Owen, in the U.S. House of Representatives, a coalition of liberal Democrats and libertarian-minded Republicans, which are a majority on this issue. But now, suddenly, the leadership of the House committee is denying them the ability to attach what is an amendment by Earl Brumnauer, Democrat of Oregon, and Dana Rohrabacher, Republican of California. I have spent the last couple days on the phone with Republican members of Congress seeking a solution that would prevent Attorney General Jeff Sessions from reigniting the failed, expensive, ignominious war on drugs, and is consistent with President Donald Trump's position, as voiced in the campaign, that he thought the people in the states should decide. Trump is decidedly not a supporter of marijuana, but he is, in this case, a supporter of states' rights, the states' rights to make their own determination. Now, I have been criticized by some on the left, saying that they won't work with Roger Stone because he is a white supremacist, a bigot, a racist, and all of the other malarkey that is thrown at anyone who supported Donald Trump. In fact, charges made against the president themselves. Oh, and I take a different view. I will work with any Democrat, any progressive, any liberal, any socialist, any Republican who agrees with me on the need to maintain the access of millions of Americans, including veterans, to legal marijuana for medicinal purposes. In the 9 states that have gone further and have legalized marijuana, cannabis, over a broader scale, well, I say let the people decide there too, because the process of legalization for so-called recreational marijuana is identical to the process for legalization of medicinal marijuana. What this means, of course, is that you cannot, Jeff Sessions, say that you are for states' rights on the issue of abortion. You are for states' rights on the issue of transgendered bathrooms, but you are opposed to states' rights on the question of legalizing cannabis. And that is where the fight lies today. This would be a superb point to announce to you that on the 15th of September at noon at the Alchemy Lounge, which is located at 604 West Pico in Los Angeles, I will be speaking at a rally sponsored by the United States Cannabis Coalition, along with other Republicans and Democrats, in a public appeal to President Trump to appeal to his Attorney General and to his White House Chief of Staff, both of whom have talked longingly about a new crackdown on medicinal marijuana. And in fact, as we know, Jeff Sessions has heavily lobbied the House Rules Committee to unfetter his hands in this regard.
We took a call yesterday, Roger. The question was, would it help Trump to come out as a supporter of medicinal marijuana? Do you think this is something that could help Trump?
Well, I would argue, Owen, that in essence he is already a supporter because he supports states' rights. What would help him politically the most? And my hat's off to John Morgan, the Orlando trial attorney, Clinton fundraiser, prominent Democrat and prospective Democratic candidate for governor of Florida, in his observation that the political benefit, never mind the public policy correctness, but the political benefit of the president simply changing marijuana from a Schedule I drug, where it currently is on a list with heroin and LSD, to a Schedule II drug, so that doctors could legally prescribe the drug for their patients who might benefit. Morgan has said the political benefit to Trump among liberals and current opponents would be extraordinary. And in this case, I believe that John Morgan is absolutely right. He, by the way, is the co-chair of the U.S. Cannabis Coalition with me, a coalition that includes, for example, Fox analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano and HBO comedian Bill Maher. Congressman Matt Gaetz is a member of the committee, as are a number of prominent socialists, libertarians, progressives, Democrats, and Republicans.
It does seem that this is a unifying cause, and aside from the political benefits, perhaps if Trump saw maybe the economic benefits that this has provided to states like Colorado, maybe that's something he could get on board with.
Well, I think you make a very good point. In 2016, the state of Colorado took in $200 million in new revenues. The medicinal marijuana industry is now a modern multi-billion-dollar industry. It is generating hundreds of millions of dollars in tax revenues for states and counties, in many cases who could not stay afloat or be solvent without these revenues, and who have included these projected revenues in their budgets going forward. But at the same time, the industry has created between 8,000 and 20,000 identifiable jobs, a number that is growing. So the economic benefits, as you point out, of this states' rights position are on top of the medicinal benefits. How did
Roger Stone, StoneColdTruth.com. This is the War Room. We've got more Roger Stone. Last segment with Roger Stone, who has survived many things to be here with us, and we are glad to have him as part of the War Room. He broke down the latest in the Menendez trial, the latest in his push for states' rights in medicinal marijuana. But he's got another segment of great material for us. Roger Stone, take it away.
Well, I do want to say that Carla Spalding, a Republican candidate for the seat of Deborah Wasserman Schultz, was scheduled to join us today. But Spalding, who is not only a Navy veteran, mother of 3, and a registered nurse, is tied up caring for 175 senior citizens who have been evacuated from Miami-Dade County to Palm Beach Gardens, north of Broward County. And therefore, rather than have her mug pasted on TV, standing next to the mayor and the sheriff of Broward County as Deborah Wasserman Schultz, who has no role whatsoever in hurricane relief, is doing. Carla Spalding is helping people in Florida today. She will join us next week to talk about what I think may be one of the most exciting congressional races in the country. And if there were 2 races to follow in this nation, one would very clearly be Omar Navarro versus Maxine Waters, a race that you were the first one to identify, and then Carla Spalding versus Deborah Wasserman Schultz. Now, Wasserman Schultz has numerous problems. Not only, of course, is there the hangover for the effort that she was caught engaging in to cheat Senator Bernie Sanders from the Democratic nomination, as revealed by the WikiLeaks disclosures. But now you have the new scandal of the Awan brothers, 2 shady Pakistani IT consultants who have now been charged with the theft of both data and money from the U.S. House of Representatives computer system. It is interesting that Wasserman Schultz not only hired these 2 consultants who seem to have a substantial lack of IT experience, but she also foisted them off on 30 other members of the House, all of them quite obviously Democrats. At the time that the Capitol Hill police advised Wasserman Schultz that the Awans were under investigation, she changed their designation within the House computer system from consultant to employee to ensure their continued access to the inner workings of the U.S. House of Representatives computer system. This, of course, makes her an accessory in their theft of both data and cash, and therefore could pose a very substantial legal problem for Wasserman Schultz, who already has a political problem. Compounding this error, Owen, extraordinarily, is not only the fact that Wasserman Schultz refuses to testify against the Awans, publicly badgered the Capitol Hill police chief, demanding the return of her computer that was seized as evidence, but now has said to her constituents that the Awans may be being persecuted because of their Muslim faith. No, Owen, they're being prosecuted because they stole money and data in violation of the law. Again, Carla Spalding, one of the most dynamic young candidates that I have seen, will join us here at the War Room next week to break down her campaign to take down Deborah Wasserman Schultz. You can look for that next week here at the War Room.
Well, and the story is Debbie Wasserman Schultz right now is scrambling around. She's a fish out of water, flopping around on the deck. Meanwhile, Spalding is actually helping Florida, helping people that are going to be affected by Hurricane Irma, doing the services that we elect these people to do. And it'll be interesting to see if Debbie Wasserman Schultz can really even end up running, because she might be facing some sort of justice that keeps her, or should I say, bars her from taking office.
Well, now, Owen, I have just gotten a message from our producer that we have a very special guest on the phone line. Senator Chuck Schumer joins us now by phone to talk about the budget deal that he reached with President Donald Trump.
Hold it. It's not him. It's Bernie Sanders. I told you I wanted to talk about Debbie Wasserman Schultz because she is a disgrace.
We seem to have gotten our line crossed. We were expecting a call from Senator Schumer.
Now, everyone wants to call into the War Room. Okay, Senator Sanders.
Well, who would you rather talk to, Bernie Sanders, or would you like to talk to Chuck Schumer? Seriously.
Why don't you put Chuck on? Would you just put him on?
It's always a thrill to be on the show with you, Roger.
There's a first for you. So how did you come to make this deal with the president, Senator Schumer?
How did I do it? I got Al Sharpton involved.
Sharpton?
I made the deal for him, Roger. I said I'd be able to patch it up if you give me about $50, $20 bills. And once I got that, clearly I could make a deal.
Well, this is
the senator. And he arranged it with his Wall Street buddies.
Now, Reverend Sharpton, we appreciate your popping on here, but this, to me, looks like skillful LBJ-style deal-making by the president. In other words, he knew that he couldn't get the assistance of McConnell and Ryan, and therefore he end-ran them to prove the ability to make a broader deal with the Democrats. What do you think former President Richard Nixon would have thought of this?
Well, I would have said this is something right out of Bobby Baker's playbook. The way he was able to maneuver this, Schumer, and get the deal. I got to give Mr. Trump credit. He did the right thing. You could call it Machiavellian, but this is real politics, my friend. And he did something that I would say was very skillful, and going right to the Democrats and Chuck Schumer.
Well, for those who haven't figured this out, we are joined by WBAI's Randy Credico, who is not only a crusading critic of the deep state, a liberal Democrat, a former opponent of Senator Schumer, but also in a previous career was one of the most celebrated impressionists in the show business realm. And I appreciate your joining us, Randy, and showing us the various characters that you are able to bring to life.
Well, it's great to be on the show, Roger. Thank you very much. I just wanted to say, this race against Debbie Wasserman Schultz, just to stick on it for a minute, is, first of all, I don't think she's going to be the Democratic candidate. This guy, Canova, is going to be running in the primary, and I think that it may be him and Mr. Spalding in the general election. But she's going to get really hurt even if she wins the primary against Mr. Canova. So she is not going to be the next representative of that congressional district.
I think that's a pretty good analysis, Randy. Canova is a Bernie Sanders supporter who ran 2 years ago. He managed to amass $3 million relatively quickly, running on the very raw feelings about Wasserman Schultz's attempt to cheat Hillary Clinton's way into the nomination. Canova is running again. Those wounds are fresh. Plus, you still have the Awan family scandal. Very clearly, Carla Spalding has a better shot against Wasserman Schultz than she would some clean, progressive Democrat. But do not underestimate the fact that Wasserman Schultz still has the vaunted condo commandos, the political bosses of the enormous housing complex that have literally hundreds of thousands of senior citizen Democrats.
Well, he could Spalding could probably put a coalition together. I mean, she's despised by the left and the right, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and people that like you and I agree on many issues, and many issues we don't agree on probably, but on this one we agree on, and she did screw Sanders, and she hasn't been good for transparency. She's been attacking WikiLeaks. I think that she definitely is vulnerable, and it would be refreshing to see anybody beat her. And even Mr. Spalding, I don't know his total record, would be refreshing to get rid of her and that corruption that she represents in the Democratic Party. She is what's wrong with the Democratic Party. She epitomizes.
So, Randy Credico, WBAI, thank you very much for joining us, Randy. Owen, I'm going to turn the baton back to you to close this, but thanks for having us here on the War Room. And next Wednesday, Carla Spalding, Republican candidate for Congress, versus Deborah Wasserman Schultz.
Thank you, Roger.